effectively a plutocracy. And so you can have whales that can buy large chunks of capital and then make, or have a lot of say over what proposals get passed. And then also one problem here is that, at least in my mind, I experience this quite a bit, is that you run into issues with voter apathy with governance tokens, because a lot of times people receive an airdrop, then they'll dump it or they'll dump part of it, and then they will not really care too much. And so what we're building out is tooling for DAOs and any member of the community to define what reputation they care about and what reputation that they should, I guess, reward with merit-based voting power, depending on how hard something is or how bad something is as well, because reputation can be good and bad. So I'll go ahead and share my screen and kind of show you what I mean here, and I will go ahead and give you a demo of Soulbound Studio. So let me go ahead and share a tab. Here we go. Okay, you guys can see the screen, correct? I'm gonna take that as a yeah.
Yes. Yep, we're good to go.
Okay, so this is Soulbound Studio. This is our no-code subgraph generation tool. And so basically the kind of flow it works is you input a contract address and it fetches the ABI and starts creating what's called a proto subgraph, basically. So we define kind of all of the different parameters within the events. So let's say whenever a new auction is made for super rare, the contract address is emitted, the token ID is emitted, auction creator, all this stuff is then put into here, as well as all the transaction metadata for that specific transaction, such as the ID, transaction to, transaction from, how much gas was spent, the transaction value, as well as the block number. And basically, these provide us a nice sort of base layer in which we can define sort of conditionals on top of and get more specific with how different things are related to each other. So I guess here, let's say we care about NFTs and we care about people buying or selling NFTs, and we want to reward people for, let's say, participating in buying or selling NFTs. So we can define what's called a badge pathway. And basically a badge pathway takes in an input, which is basically what sort of metric or event that we care about, as well as who should be winning these badges. And you can have multiple badge levels, kind of similar to something like a skill tree in an RPG game, where you can progress through it and unlock different levels of these skills. So if we go over down here to create badge pathway, it opens up a node, and we can name this reward buyers. Oops. We can write in a description. This is just metadata at this point. And basically, we can decide, is this a negative thing? Maybe we don't like rewarding buyers. Maybe we don't like when people buy NFTs, and we're like an anti-NFT DAO. We can reward it with negative reputation within the context of our protocol. But for now, we're just going to call it positive reputation. We have 3 different types of badges. For here, we'll just check a counter. So counters, they increment depending on how many times this event has happened for a specific person. So if I buy an NFT, I'm going to get 1 counter point. And then basically, as we have more, it's going to increase, and we can define badge levels. So when we create badge levels, the soul score is basically just a scalar value that tells us how difficult, or basically how much weight should be behind this action. So let's give this one a very, very easy one. So let's say they buy 1 NFT, they're going to get a badge with a soul score of 1. And now we want to make it a little bit harder for the next people. So let's give it a badge soul score of 2. And we'll say if they buy 5 NFTs, they get this badge. And then finally, the Giga Chad will say if you buy 10,000 NFTs, you can get a soul score of 10. And now you have a lot of governance power here. And these can also be, you can make multiple badge pathways from one event here. So within this sold, let's say we also care about this buyer. We can call this badge pathway reward buyers. Or let's go, sorry, reward sellers. And put in some more stuff. Again, we'll make it a counter. In this case, if we sell something, we'll give this badge to the seller, because this award is the awarded to parameter here tells us who should be winning this badge from this batch of data. And so in this case, we want to reward the seller, so we're going to tie it to the seller. And we'll do the same thing. So we'll give them 1 if they sell 1 badge, 2 if they sell 5, and then we'll give them the soul score of 10 if they sell 10,000. Obviously, this is not actually how you would want to build out your reputation and kind of how this all is balanced out. but this gives you a nice kind of understanding of how this flow works. And I guess one thing is this week, we're actually going to be adding in a custom input. So right now we only have just a number of ones that we hard coded in because we're actually doing some kind of cool stuff. But from user responses, we're feeling that it's actually not as important, not as cool kind of as we once thought. So basically, we're actually running an entire SQLite database in the front end, and we're pulling data from this SQLite database. So for instance, here you can see the offer placed event has been indexed 2,093 times. And from this data, we can then understand how many badges or how many people will win a certain badge type to allow for kind of an understanding of what the actual distribution is like. However, we're also going to provide an option here in a couple of days to be able to just plug in any contract, pull down the ABI, which will get parsed by Etherscan or whatever the equivalent is for any chain, because this does also work on any EVM chain. And that's kind of how this works. You can attach images there as well if you choose to attach custom images. Oh, actually, I'm forgetting a very important piece about all this. So this nice fancy GUI is fine, but how does this actually relate to subgraph development? So over here in the preview tab, you can see that this actually dynamically generates all this subgraph code for you. So that way you can copy it, or ideally we're writing some backend stuff to allow people to deploy to the Graph's decentralized network from a single push over here with this publish subgraph button. But this basically abstracts away all of the subgraph development stuff you need to start writing subgraphs for tracking a protocol or set of protocols, set of different contracts. So that way you can start defining pretty complex and expressive reputation. Is there anything else that I want to specifically talk about this?
Can you actually zoom in on one of those things that you were showing us? It's like the fields where you're putting it in. It was a little hard for us to see. There you go. Perfect. Yeah, it's perfect.
So you can see here. So I guess kind of, is there anything else here? I talked about the code generation, which is a pretty rad bit here. I talked about negative badge pathways. I guess I can talk about the different types of badges as well. So we have 3 types of badges offered. We have counters, which check the number of occurrences an event has happened for a particular user, such as any sellers that are tied to a specific person. Then we have a direct check, which checks a specific value. So if we go into direct check, we can see over here, it's awarded to the seller whenever the, let's say, transaction value is greater than, let's say, some amount. And so basically here we define the amount, so we can say like this many gwei, for instance. And so this allows you to do some cool stuff as far as how you want to award things. Just basically adds in some cool conditionals. And then accumulators are the same as a direct check. However, accumulators sum all of the events that have occurred for a particular user. So let's say we want to give somebody a badge if they have spent over 1 ETH in transaction fees. We can go over here, we can go accumulator, and we can say awarded to the buyer whenever their transaction gas is greater than some amount, and we can define this. And again, this all gets generated here in this badges.ts bit, which is all nice and snazzy. So that's Soulbound Studio, which is our no-code interface for doing all this. Does anybody have any questions or want to talk about anything before I kind of move on to some of our CLI examples?
Somebody has to have some questions on the functionality of this, right?
Is there a way to interact with this programmatically instead of using is that what the CLI is doing?
Yeah, that's exactly what the CLI does. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing, and I'll share my command line here now.
So is the CLI basically the shift from here's no code, here's how you get into the code side of things?
Yep, and it does it in a way that's a lot more approachable than the Graph CLI. I'm not sure, has anyone done any subgraph development with the graph init command and all this stuff? No, Mac has.
Kent has raised his hand.
Kent raised his hand. He appeared, raised his hand, and then disappeared.
It looks like we do have.
Me and Alex went hard on this thing, so yeah.
Yeah, Kent also contributed to this quite a bit. This isn't just me. Like I did just champion this, so I definitely could not have done it without Mac.
Subgraphs are amazing. They're just like, if you really get, you can get into the like what everyone knows about creating schemas which are useful for dApps, but then if you really start becoming creative, thinking about reputation, right? You can really grab tons of different contracts, tons of different ecosystem, and create like a very generalized reputation across many ecosystems instead of having like very localized ones. And that's the reputation that you create. So yeah, it's lovely to think about this space.
Yeah, I guess one thing that's also kind of cool is that so reputation is a pretty dynamic thing, and what a protocol cares about should be fluid and evolve. And so basically, by using these subgraphs to define reputation, this also means that you can update these subgraphs. So you can have governance proposals. You can basically ask your community and be like, hey, I'm proposing this change to our governance model and our reputation model. So adding in this contract that we're tracking with these different badge parameters, like what does everyone think? You can vote for or against it. So that way you actually have a very dynamic form of governance that just can lead to some really cool stuff. And I guess I'll go ahead and share my screen for the this thing. So let me go ahead and share. All right. So can everyone see my terminal?
Yep, I can.
Okay, sweet. Okay, so we started off with a fork of some of the graph init commands. We're actually kind of transitioning more over to some standalone commands that are a lot cleaner. We're doing quite a bit of refactoring. But anyway, what this allows you to do is it allows you to spin up a proto subgraph immediately for your contract or set of contracts you're working with. So that way you can start indexing data to use in your front end by calling on these different schema types, or also just basically providing you a template to be able to build on top of. So we run this by going soulbound init --proto. And then it's going to go ahead and ask us a few questions. It's going to say like what protocol is it for. We'll say Ethereum. We'll say we're deploying to the hosted service. Doesn't really matter what our subgraph name is for the context of this. We'll call this Moonshot Live. And we'll say we're tracking a contract on mainnet. Ask for the chain ID, contract address. For our sake, I'm going to just grab Bored Apes contract. Technically, it works with any contract. Actually, does anyone have any contracts they want us to track? The only stipulation here is we're not configured to work with proxy contracts yet. That's one thing I'm actually working on today. Anyone have anything they want to track? ERC20s are kind of boring. So I would track like Gitcoin or something, but ERC20s actually don't have that many events to parse through. Okay.
There's the NFTX. I'll give you the NFTX contract, the inventory one. Let me look for that. Oh no, wait, they're all proxies.
No Wonder has one. Is this verified on Etherscan?
There's one in the chat.
So, oh yes, rad. Marshall lots.
Yeah, it should be verified.
We'll pass this in, and then it asks for the start block, so that we don't have to start indexing all the data from the entire blockchain. So let's go ahead and copy this in, and we'll call this Marshall. And it goes ahead and spins up this proto subgraph that's populated with all these different entity types that we predefined. And then we'll go ahead and push it up and deploy it live, and we'll start indexing that data, and we'll make some queries to it. And if you guys didn't know, this is a lot faster than this normally goes with the graph init stuff. So let me go ahead and deploy this up to the hosted service here. And just grab and decide which one I want to do.
Run code gen.
Yeah, so we technically don't have to, because this actually already populates all of it. We'll just go graph deploy, and we'll just deploy it up to this Odos tracker. So there we go. And then once that deploys, I'll go ahead and share my screen, and we can start making some calls to this contract. Let's see. There we go. Okay, it's live now. Let me go ahead and share my screen over to my tab here. So, all right. So we now have, let's clear this out because we haven't defined any badges. But basically, we're now tracking this, and we can get all these different query types. We can just say, like, let's list out all the different event types that we have. Let's just list the first 100. We can just see what events we are even messing with. So right now, so far it's been indexed. We have an approval for all, and transfer events. And from here, we can also index all those different types of data. So we can get the transaction value here, the timestamp, the event type that it had, and basically we're indexing any contract very, very quickly, which is really nice. And I can do a little bit of dive into more of the code end of things if anyone's curious about kind of what our schemas look like and how this all works. And does anyone have any questions regarding the CLI? I'm personally really excited about the CLI. I think it's really cool stuff you can do, and it's like a way better user experience than the current one. So
I'm curious, like what the limits on like indexing something would be. Like how big can this get, do you think, before it starts to just like get problematic?
They can get pretty huge. We haven't formally tested what the limits are here, but we've done some ridiculous amounts of entities floating around a subgraph.
Yeah.
Problem. We've never broken it, and I've tried hard. I mean, we also support indexing multiple contracts. I'm not going to give a live demo of that because we're refactoring it. But we support adding contracts, so you can track multiple different contracts. And so I was on Polygon, so there's like a lot of transactions, more transactions going on at Polygon. I was tracking, I think, 4 different contracts within one subgraph and had absolutely no problems making queries to it. So it's definitely pretty robust.
Nice.
Yeah, super fun. Anyone have any questions on proto subgraphs and kind of how they relate to everything else? And I guess questions about subgraphs, reputation? Oh, talk about the bridge. Yeah. So obviously subgraphs are just kind of they're more, I mean, they're off chain, right? Because they're on the Graphs decentralized network, but ultimately they are off chain for our example, or for our use case. So question is, if we're defining DAO reputation or just an individual's reputation, also I need to talk about soulbound logistics and like transferability and all that sort of stuff. We'll get into that in a sec. But basically, we have this issue that we need to overcome, which is giving the pitch for how you see this used as reputation. Okay, yeah, for sure. So I'll talk about the bridge. Let me like stay focused. I'm not getting distracted with talking about all the different stuff. So basically, we have this issue of bridging off-chain data on-chain. So we have to bridge the query results from the subgraph itself and get a verifiable proof, or at least some sort of formal proof, some way about how to get it on-chain. So that way we can then put it into a Merkle root and distribute it to everyone who needs it. Or let's say not distribute a Merkle root and just like airdrop it to a bunch of people. And so we had this idea that might, I mean, we'll see basically in what time span this becomes not really relevant anymore. Did anybody watch any of the Graph Days talks, specifically the one about shell proofs? So basically, I'll talk about what we're doing first, and then I'll talk about shell proofs. So we have this sort of idea that's about attestations. And Jordan, correct me if I'm wrong about any logistics. Mac as well, feel free to butt in whenever I start speaking something that's incorrect. But basically, indexers, because they're indexers, delegators, not sure 100%. I think it's indexers. But basically, the people who are providing the subgraphs and actually calling them can put up an attestation to bridge the results from a subgraph call that they have on chain. And because of how the graph ecosystem all works, they have to put up a stake of GRT. And if anybody can prove that this query result is false, their GRT gets slashed. So they have an economic incentive to provide correct information there, which provides, an economically secure way to get query results on chain that doesn't use Chainlink oracles, for instance. Nothing against Chainlink oracles, but for our use case, we need a little bit more of a dynamic option here. And I guess another thing that's kind of going to happen within the next 6 months, year, is that there's some interesting stuff regarding shell proofs, which are new, super tiny, super fast. So it's one-time bridging of data. Yeah, basically. So you can bridge, let's say every, I don't know, week, we want to update badges on people's profile. We can make a call and pull this stuff in and then update everyone's badges, because these are all subgraphs. So basically we can just populate the data in a Merkle root and then distribute it accordingly. And basically, so subgraphs become read-oriented rollups if you can bridge data back as a local route. Yeah, basically. And so yeah, it's all reliant on this whole attestation idea, and that they have this economic incentive to provide correct information. Then there's also a challenge window. Yeah, so it's very similar to how optimistic rollups work, or I guess how rollups work. And then also there are shell proofs. So shell proofs are a new ZK proof that the Graph internal team has been developing. And one of the really exciting use cases for it is verifiable queries to the Graph's decentralized network. And so once we have that, you have mathematical proofs behind your query and your result. And that really opens the door for everything, because all of a sudden reputation now is really fast and super secure and really feasible to work with, I guess, really. Does that kind of make sense? Did I talk about the bridge correctly there? Does everyone kind of make sense on how that idea works? And then I'll get into the pitch of like how this can be used for reputation. Okay, cool. So I guess how this can be used for reputation. So subgraphs are really useful tools for indexing data. And for reputation and for governance, I think that we're trying to build merit, at least with our tooling, we're trying to build meritocracies in which somebody's voting power is dependent on how much good or bad they have done for a system. And so what this allows you to do is because it's all no code, it lowers the barrier of entry to indexing this data and manipulating this data however we see fit to what we think is a good governance model or what we want to reward within our ecosystem with voting power. And so that's kind of the whole idea behind SoulScore, is that you have an aggregated reputation total within this subgraph as like a person. So whenever you hit a certain value, so let's say you are awarded one of these badges for, let's say, buying 5 NFTs or buying 10,000 NFTs. Like let's say you're the Giga Chad with 10 SoulScore. This then is aggregated to your account in the form of badges, and badges are soulbound NFTs that have this value within them that are only given to you from these sources such as the bridge or using shell proofs. And SoulScore aggregation, yeah, exactly. And so SoulScore aggregation then allows you to make votes, and your voting power is determined based off of your total SoulScore amount. And so basically for this, it allows you to define good reputation, which increases your, whoops, this thing's crashed. Let's see. All right, cool. It was just updated now. So yeah, indexed very quickly. That was 9 minutes. So I'm gonna stop sharing this to you because I'm just talking now. But anyway, let's see. So the thing is, so these are soulbound, and the reason why they're soulbound is because you can't have an economic incentive to sell your reputation there. Because obviously, if we don't make them soulbound, sorry, I need to stay focused. Stop reading this chat. Kent, the thing, it actually wasn't indexed because it was cached. That was a brand new contract we've never indexed before, so that just indexed super quickly. Anyway, on the topic of soulbound NFTs, why they're soulbound, why it's important. So anyway, it's important that they're soulbound because effectively you can't have an economic incentive to sell your reputation, because then that kind of nullifies this whole point of reputation, because you have a monetary way to buy someone's influence or buy influence within a community, as opposed to having a meritocracy in which you can't buy somebody's influence. You can only contribute to or against this system. And so basically from this interface, you define these badge pathways. These badges then have soul scores. These soul scores define your voting power for protocols and proposals for, I guess, proposals within a protocol. So yeah, does that kind of make sense? Does that
Sure.
make sense there without all that rambling in the middle?
Sure. I've spent the last 12 weeks deep diving on using NFTs versus verified credentials on and off chain.
Mm-hmm.
Basically everything the SBT paper, the DSOC paper has been covering. So I like to see this stuff in action and see that y'all are chipping away at some of this.
Yeah, it's been really fun to work on. I'm really excited to get people using it finally. And so we've actually been around for quite a while. I think the first iterations of this company were started about a year and a half ago, Jordan? Is that right? Somewhere in that range. We just rebranded our name after the DSOC paper came out to Soulbound Labs. It used to be called
I
Badge.
figured y'all did. I was going to ask you that, but I was like almost 100% sure. In fact, I think I found when I was farting around looking for, when did y'all pick up Soulbound XYZ? Like last
Jordan
month?
can answer that question. I don't know.
That was about like 2 weeks after the blog post. I saw that someone was selling it for $500. I'm like, mine. And we're putting it to better use than they were.
Yeah, I looked it up. I looked it along with several others up because of the passport project we're using.
Mm-hmm.
We were considering using Soul and a lot of the stuff, and that was before the paper came out. And then as soon as the paper came out, I was like, all right, all these URLs are going to be gone for sure.
Yeah, it's popping off. The Soulbound, it took me like a little bit to come around to it, because if you search Soulbound Amazon, the first result is like a romance. It's like, what do you call that? Reverse harem paranormal romance. So I had that like mental model in my head, but now I'm kind of seeing it as reputation and some good stuff right now too. So yeah.
Super fun stuff. Is there anything that I missed that we want to talk about?
Yeah.
Exciting stuff coming up regarding the GUI and this whole flow of inputting a contract. I really want to see you guys build out reputation pathways for Moonshot, let's say, or Gitcoin or anything else. Please build reputation pathways. We need more stuff there. So please.
So here's one thing we've been thinking about, like reputation using badges or soulbound tokens, basically non-transferable NFTs is all we're really talking about. But using them from like I think one of the things that you proposed and I think is a great solution, by the way. And I'm not making any judgment calls on solutions. It seems like everybody right now is making judgment calls on verify credentials or the way you use SBTs or whatever, and they're flying all this stuff all over Twitter. And the truth is, we're going to do it all, right? And we're gonna land on some sort of mix. It seems like one of the ways that you are thinking about it is like almost inside out. Like you're starting with the reputation at the badge level and like increasing or decreasing its reputation, versus one of the things we've been thinking about is just using some sort of outside thing to maybe use something like the graph and then go straight up verify like that a badge exists with said address. This person's trying to attest their identity, and they can do that just by connecting the two, saying like, I own this badge, I can verify that I own this badge. Then to multiply that out to say like, okay, well, they're in 28 communities, they can verify 28 badges, but that's really to read them as like as a Sybil signal, like how strong of a Sybil signal they are or not. And then to take all of that score packaged and use that as either a passport upload to something, or maybe you print a passport out on an NFT and use that places. It's like more of like an aggregator from the outside in to a soulbound token. So this is like really interesting stuff to me. Fahim's being quiet, but I'm sure he's got a billion questions as well, since he was helping me build passport.
I kind of got in like halfway, like half an hour into it, but I'm assuming everything's on chain, right? So in this scenario, we don't really care about like showing information. The main thing, that was one thing with passport, that we did have PI information that we did want to like hide, and that was the main reason for like having verifiable credentials. But if we're okay with all the information being on chain and like showing it, like soulbound token especially is like a great way to track. I'm assuming there's some sort of when you were saying like aggregation, there's not like additional NFTs or anything that are being kind of issued. They're just the soulbound token attaches to some sort of like memory space where different reputations are being added and increased or decreased, and like.
So it's actually it's very kind of fluid, I guess. So it's up to the community to decide what badges they care about. So it's definitely possible to like bring in other badges from things that we do care about. So let's say, I mean, because also one thing we're playing around with right now is the idea of templating. And so having basically predefined badge pathways for different types of protocols, right? So if you have a Moloch DAO, you should kind of be able to spin up something that looks more or less like a pretty good reputation model for a Moloch DAO. And from this, basically you can add on to more of it. So you can track different types of badges from a specific type of Moloch DAO or a group of Moloch DAOs to add into your own protocol that basically you just define as being like, okay, we care about this actions. So that way it's very, very flexible. And because we can track multiple contracts, no problem within a subgraph, we really can aggregate a lot of different data without just like repeating ourselves a bunch of different times.
So the score, or like in this sense, the reputation, like for the particular entity, based on what badge they're looking for, they can just use all the events that are emitted on the subgraph that to kind of make like score. Say there's like, say Moonshot Collect made like a badge, and you can target like all the reputation updates on the pathway for the badges for all the individuals who own like a Moonshot Collect type of badge, like soul badge, and they can see if I just track the contract information and all the events on the subgraph for a particular address, I can see like where the reputation is at right now, type of thing. Like that's.
Yeah. Did you join before or after I showed off the GUI stuff?
After.
I know when he showed it off, because I was like, where the hell is Fahim right now?
So I'll show you exactly kind of how this looks. Adios, Mac. Have a good time at your Twitter space. I can show off our no-code interface for defining this stuff, because we have this concept of proto subgraphs, which are kind of like template subgraphs that anyone can spin up. I think you saw the live demo for the CLI stuff. And then from these kind of base metrics, we're calling them, you can define badge pathways. And so I'll share my screen here. So this is our no-code interface. We're just tracking super rare right now. And basically, we input the contracts, the network, yada, yada, yada. It parses the ABI and gets all these different events. And from these events, we can define criteria we care about. Beautiful.
Holy shit.
Wow.
Holy
I couldn't even
fuck.
get that we like multiple trolls attacking.
Oh, agreed.
Motherfucker.
Okay.
Just remove them.
Alex.
Word. All right. So anywho, continuing onward with that. So we can track different types of events, and from these different events, we can define what actions we care about. So for instance, here I just made two sample pathways, and badge pathways basically just define a flow of badge of actions that we care about with different difficulties here. And so I actually changed this up a little bit. Let's say a counter. So with reward buyers, this pathway, we are building this off of the sold event, and the sold event contains a buyer and a seller. And so whenever somebody buys or sells an NFT, an event is emitted with the person who sold it as well as the person who bought it. And so let's say we want to reward somebody for buying an NFT. So as long as they have bought at least one, they're going to get a badge with a soul score of 1 here. And if they buy 5 NFTs, we'll give them a badge with a soul score of 2. And if they buy 10,000, they get a badge with a soul score of 10. And so basically you can define these progressions of actions that you care about to mint as NFTs. And basically these are all made within this specific entity type called a badge, which is over here in the entity thing over here. I think it's user badge. I don't remember exactly what it is. I'm going to put a refactor in here. But basically from this, you make these specific entities within the subgraph, which then have a user tied to them and the person who won them, as well as like the information there, which is then what gets aggregated in and minted as the NFT. And also all of this stuff is generated for you automatically, depending on your GUI and how you map out these different badges. All this code generation stuff makes it so it's possible to build out subgraphs without knowing how to code, and defining reputation pathways without knowing how to code as well, which I think is nice for encouraging community engagement, something like this. Does that kind of make sense? Or does that answer your question a little bit, Fahim?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. That's cool. And I guess
Dave, if you're talking, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, your mic's farting around a little bit.
okay. Thanks for the question. I don't have much to add on to that, or like that does explain it, and I'll look into it a bit more, and that looks pretty cool. Like the awesome thing about anything on chain is that it's much easier if you just have like events submitted, and like then you're also curating those events and like going deeper into that to track the event and put that out on GUI. That sounds sick.
Totally. And you know, right now we're all on chain stuff because we really care about the security of our protocol and kind of how it all works. However, bridging off-chain credentials on chain and minting them as badges really would be pretty game changing as far as governance models go. Because then you can start defining stuff such as people's actions. Let's say, oh, somebody's bringing in a bunch of action on the Discord, or super active on Twitter, bringing a lot of engagement to our DAO, or bringing a lot of shine to our protocol, mint them a badge. And there's a lot of really cool things that we can kind of do from there. So
yeah, if you look at like Lens protocol, they do. They're also using the subgraph heavily, right? And they're putting in content IDs from like things that they're uploading to IPFS into their events, and then you can get it from the graph API call and then pull up using the IPFS hash that's coming from there. So that's definitely something you guys could implement as well.
Totally. Yeah, for sure.
One thing, Nabler, that you didn't mention that I'm very excited about is that the Soulbound Studio defines a reputation system to analyze both historical actions and future actions in the subgraph. We bridge that on-chain into a registry. Who has what voting power in which dimensions? Are you big into NFTs? Are you active in governance? Get super granular there.
Mm-hmm.
But you also have voting power to update the reputation system that awards the badges. So I like the recursiveness of that, because it's like, cool, we have a system to issue soulbound tokens and some criteria about who gets what voting power, but that's a one and done event. There needs to be some pattern, some, system in place to update the pattern that updates the reputation. And that closing the loop is going to be this year's challenge. But after that, I'm like, this could be good. This could be like a nice contribution to the ecosystem.
Yeah. I like this pattern of dynamic governance that updates kind of as new things are discovered, or, this sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of all I've been working on there mainly.
Have you guys thought about incorporating like Lens data, or like that's definitely something that that is already like easily kind of, they have a subgraph built out, like you have to deploy your own, or like there's a few that are getting built out, and then it's just another avenue if you wanted to incorporate like a social aspect to Soulbound.
For sure. Yeah. That's definitely something we'll look into, and integrating all of that, and excited to play around with that. Yeah.
One thing I hadn't thought about, Fahim, was that, and Chell's team too, is like we were thinking about badges and stamping them just true, like not in the stamps that Passport was doing is like an attestation that's either true, false for a badge. What I hadn't thought about is like, it doesn't work the same way as we would do verified credentials. Most of the stuff that we're doing verified credentials for is off-chain. So what we were thinking about doing was just doing some sort of, we're not building this yet, we're just brainstorming it out, with some sort of check just to see that, address has NFT. But what I hadn't thought about was like that it doesn't have to be a true false. It could actually be a check that also gives badge strength. And that's interesting. Especially because like it almost has to be true false when it's a verified credential, because like it's a one-time printing of a credential of a thing that's verified. And then you just really judge it by its age, and you reissue credentials later if needed. But in the case of like checking to see if an account owns a badge, that's probably an ongoing checking process anyways that you do every, I don't know, probably run a job to do that in order to loop those in the Passport. And if you're running that job to do that, you could also get updates of the score every time you run that job. So if your score went up each time and you ran that job every 4 hours, 8 hours, every day, whatever, then it could update people's stamped score for that specific thing each time. That's
I
interesting.
did like 2 ways to get that score. Like either we do an RPC call to get like the update of the contract, or we go on the subgraph and if we emit events, or
I do want to play around with that subgraph though. Like emitting events could be very interesting there in terms of using that to update stamps. You're giving us a lot to play with, is what y'all are doing. Great job, y'all.
Yeah, that's what we're doing. We're trying to build infrastructure to allow people to build some cool shit, man. Like the like subgraphs are so cool, but the barrier to entry to them is so high. And we saw this really heavily at Graph Day, or the Graph Hack that we were at, because we were at Graph Day. And so many people are just bashing their heads against their computers for hours trying to get this, you know, the Graph Init CLI tool working. And just causes a lot of headaches. And so hopefully this smooths that process and allows people to deploy very quickly, as you guys saw with that little demo, and start indexing their data and using that. So
yeah, that's super cool. I did have another question. I can't remember. Oh, can you send the link to that? Is there a talk for the Graph Days talk on the, what was it on
shell proofs?
Shell proofs, yeah. If you find that link, I would love to. You can also DM it to me after this if you don't have it right now.
Yeah, I don't have it off the top of my head. I can definitely DM it to you.
Yeah.
Let me see here.
Or just throw it like the. Are you in the Discord Moonshot Collective Discord?
Also, gonna throw. Actually, I'll throw that in a second. Also, I'm gonna take this spotlight and chill a little bit.
Yeah, chill away, my friend.
Yeah, so we're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna drop in this our Gitcoin grants. We just made it today, so I don't think it's gonna get applied for or get active for the Gitcoin grants thing. But feel free, check us out, Soulbound Labs or soulbound.xyz is our website. Follow us on Twitter, link at Soulbound Labs.
Just tweet that you want to enter it into the grants and see if you can like get FTD's attention by it.
On Labs.
also
And then
kind of like a question out to Liz. I think he's in the channel. If he had some thoughts well on it, like, because I know he made like a contract that tweeted out like a soulbound contract. I saw him like kind of tweet that out. I don't know if you had like some thoughts as well, but
I couldn't hear you there for a second. You were breaking up a little bit. Can you say that one more time?
I was saying like I think Bliss is in the audience as well. If you had thoughts on it on the presentation, because he also tweeted out like a burnable soulbound like NFT contract on Twitter. It's pretty cool.
Bliss here.
Yeah, I'm here. I think I understand what he's saying. He's talking about the was it last week or so? I tweeted about claimable and burnable NFT contract. Full disclosure, I'm working with Alex as well on Soulbound XYZ. So I have a lot of I have a lot of opinions and a lot of things, and we're kind of working through some of the solutions that he just pointed out. So I'm excited about it. And just check it out, and if there's any input, if there's any opinions that you have or any things that you feel like we can improve on, just let me know and let us know. Work through it.
Well, that's sick. I saw that contract you posted, and I was like, okay, that's you're definitely thinking about it, because for a while, like I think people are still in the zeitgeist of like CT. Everyone's tweeting about like Soulbound, especially since that article, like the paper came out, and yeah, it's good to see like everybody like iterating on various contract, like soulbound contracts. And that was kind of cool. We'll see your one too.
Yeah, and thanks for him. Yeah, it does have a lot of applications. When you think about even outside like the crypto world, there's a lot of ways where you can use credentials if it can be personalized and there's so many ways you can utilize, non-transferable tokens or, some mechanism of it. So I'm excited.
I'm excited for you guys. Good stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very excited and happy to share it. And also very happy to work with anyone who's remotely curious and playing around with their stuff. Please reach out to me. Please reach out to anyone else. And we'd be more than happy to walk you through building subgraphs, building some reputation models, and kind of playing with that whole thing. So yeah, please reach out.
Yeah, because I got a project going on that has to do with reputation and soulbound NFT. So this might be right up. I just pinged like 50 people during this meeting to ask. Awesome. So
sweet, dude. Yeah. Appreciate it.
What's the best way to reach out to you guys? Do you have like a preferences? Like, are you guys on Discord, Telegram? Like, what's the best way if someone had like a dev question and they were stuck at 11:30 at night? Like, how do they find you?
So we actually have a Discord. I'll drop it in here. I'll also drop it in the Moonshot thing as well. Let me go ahead and add in. Actually, maybe I won't drop it in here because we've had some people bomb in this chat. So maybe it's a bad idea if I just share it there. But we have a Discord, and then we also have you can reach out to me on Telegram or Twitter. Yeah, Jordan.
I'll hunt you down.
Same thing. Yeah, you guys can hunt me down. I'm relatively public. It shouldn't be too difficult to find me. I'll drop a link in the Moonshot chat though, so that way we can publicize that for our Discord.
Nice job, dude.
This looks really great. I can't understate how excited I am about this and identity and all the work that I've been doing over the last like 12 weeks about it. And it's like I see parallel paths of other teams like y'all building stuff. And I think that all these parallel paths is going to merge into some great technology. And man, if you asked me a year ago if we could ever solve the Sybil problem or just the identity problem in general, I would have been like, I don't know if we can. And like that has changed. That has flipped 180. I do actually think we're going to solve Sybil problems. And that's pretty cool. I'm not generally overly optimistic on these kind of things being in this for a while. So yeah, super excited about y'all's project. I'm sure Fahim and I will be reaching out at some point in time to talk about some stuff for sure.
Please do. Yeah, please do. Super, super excited. It means a lot, man. Thank you.
Nice. Does anybody have any other questions or thoughts or comments, or should we break early? Awkward emu. Sounds like we're breaking early. All right, guys. Thanks.
We're just playing.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, walk the plank. You got to walk the plank.
Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for coming. It was
Thanks
awesome.
for letting me share. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Hey, nice meeting everybody. Been a pleasure.
Awesome.
Awesome. I'll have this recording and also share it with you guys once it's posted. It'll just go in my calendar invite, and then I'll get it up on YouTube so you guys have it as well.
Wonderful. Awesome.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Take care.
See ya. Bye, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.